Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching today. Welcome again to another session in the Fantasy Fellowship Convention. I'm Shannon and I'm a member here of the innovation team here at the Fantasy Fellowship. In this session, we have again the pleasure of being joined by Kieran Larwood, the best-selling children's author of the Five Realms series, Carnival of the Lost series, and also the Tree Keepers, the most recent release here. The first book of the Five Realms series, The Legend of Podkin One-Ear, actually won the Blue Peter Award. I hope they gave you a badge, Kieran. Can't say I've ever met anyone actually that had a badge before.
Oh, I've got it here. Hey.
Fantastic. I mean, if anyone in the UK, hopefully you know about the Blue Peter badges. Anyone watching outside of the UK, they're very prestigious. Absolutely harks back to childhood. So very fitting that a children's author should have one. So as you may have seen, and I may reference another session through some of the questions, that is because earlier today, Kieran ran through a workshop all about map making. And as you can see from the naked cover of the Tree Keepers, he is absolutely well placed to talk about that. So check that out on demand. So we have just shy of 30 minutes and gosh, we had plenty of questions. So if it's all right with you, Kieran, we'll just jump straight into it.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm trying not to start with a very typical question. So I'm going to pinch one from Hannah that submitted. So how would you describe your work to someone who hasn't read any of it before?
Oh crikey. So I write for children's middle grades, so that's kind of eight and upwards. And it is mostly fantasy, yeah, kind of epic fantasy with rabbits. But the Carnival of the Lost, that's historical.
And what made you go away from start to the rabbits and then historical, and how do you feel that it's your work is evolving?
Well, I mean, I've always been a fantasy fan ever since I first read The Hobbit myself when I was about 7, and I mean that's like kind of exclusively the books I read. But then when I started writing, for some reason, I never really wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an illustrator, and I
Oh.
never even tried writing until I was kind of in my 30s. And it was because I wanted to. I was working as a reception teacher at the time, which is 4 and 5-year-old if you're not from the UK. And I used to read a lot of picture books with them, like Julia Donaldson and the Gruffalo, that kind of thing. So I thought I could have a go at doing one of those for myself and do the pictures, but I didn't have a story to go with it. And I asked a few of my friends, and they were all too busy to write. So I just sat down and started writing, and then just like completely got the writing bug, and just found out I enjoyed writing stories more than doing the pictures. But the first when I'd practiced a bit and I was ready to write a book, the first idea that kind of popped into my head was set in the Victorian times, and it was about a sideshow of kind of Victorian circus freaks who go and solve crimes in their spare time. But I think what I really should have done was start with a fantasy book. So when that kind of series came to an end, I sat down and thought, I'm going to write my own fantasy book this time, and I'm going to create my own fantasy world. And what I did was I went through all my sketchbooks, looking for an idea.
Oh wow.
And if you know me from the Fantasy Fellowship, I do lots of doodles and things and drawings. And I just found every now and then throughout the years, I've got my sketchbook here actually, I doodled kind of the same kind of thing, and that was rabbits, but like obviously fantasy rabbits. And if you can see that they're with like swords and shields and
Oh
weapons
wow.
and things. And there were loads of them kind of going back years and years. And I just thought to myself, this is kind of like an idea that's trapped in my head trying to get out. So then I sat down and I started planning a world with of real just rabbits in, and it built up from there really. But it all came from my actual doodles and sketches that I'd done.
Brilliant. And we asked this question in an earlier session. Damien submitted a fantastic idea of how has your world, how has the Isle of Wight influenced the stories that you write? Are you surrounded by rabbits?
Well, was growing up, there are rabbits everywhere, but actually, recently their numbers have really severely dropped, and like you hardly see them now in the wild around here, which is quite disturbing. But apparently, there's there's like a horrible new disease that they get where they kind of like they just die in their burrows, and it's decimated the rabbit
Oh.
population. But when I was growing up, yeah, there were rabbits absolutely everywhere, and I rescued some from like weasels and things like that, and I kept them in as pets and things and stuff. Yeah, I used to walk past big rabbit warrens all the time. I always used to wonder what was
Mhm.
going on inside, whether they were having like little parties in there and little towns and cities and that. Yeah, so it all fed into my work, and also the kind of the environment of the Isle of Wight. I'm very lucky living here. We've got like beautiful forests and downs
Mhm.
and beaches and stuff, and I like to bring that into the story as well.
Absolutely. And I feel like you've got that nice, humble side of things. But as ever with children's stories, there's always a darker undertone, isn't there? And for you, I guess it's the life of the rabbits, eh?
Yeah, you always got to have like scary villains. Yeah, and try not to be too scary, but yeah, I don't think I've given anyone nightmares so far. That's wood.
Perhaps not. So got a question here from Jen. What is it that draws you to the fantasy genre as a reader, but also as a writer?
Um, well, it's pure escapism, isn't it? Really, and it's also
Mhm.
I don't know the real world's quite mundane, isn't it? And quite boring, and also especially at the moment, it's like quite distressing, and you know if the stuff that's in the news and stuff about the environment stuff. So it's always nice to just kind of completely escape to a completely different world where there's magic and dragons and adventure and things like that. I think we've sucked the magic out of everyday life, haven't we? And it's all all about taxes and gardening and stuff like that. There's no magic anymore. So fantasy is how you get your fix of magic and adventure.
Could not agree more. Absolutely could not agree more. And Erin put a question in here around what, as an author, is there any in the fantasy genre space that you admire? Is there anyone that you'd, aspire to be like?
Um, in fantasy in general, or in children's.
Let's go with both.
Oh, crikey. So yeah, I try not to read too much children's fiction. I get sent like quite a few books to read and through, but I don't like. I'm a bit worried that I might kind of, if I read too much, I might kind of start changing my writing to be more like somebody. But
Okay.
there's loads, there's so much amazing children's fiction out there at the moment. I really like Sophie Anderson, who wrote The House with Chicken Legs. She's brilliant, and Emma Carroll is amazing if you like historical fiction.
Hmm.
Um, they're both really great. And then as for fantasy, I've got lots of favorite fantasy authors. Obviously, Robin Hobb is my all-time massive, amazing, most favorite author. I love China Mayville is really good. He wrote Perdido, Street Station, and The Scar. And Steph Swainson is one of my favorites. Who did the Circle books. So that yeah, if I could write books as imaginative and well written as them, I'd be really happy.
Has there ever been any books that you have come across in your time, maybe either children's books or maybe the fantasy books that you read for your own pleasure? Is there any that you've thought, wow, I really wish I'd written that?
Oh yeah, lots. I love. I mean, my favorite book in terms of the writing is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. And
Uh-huh.
that's the writing there is absolutely. That's just like the most perfectly written book. So I'll go back and reread that quite a lot and just kind of yeah in awe. And I also love The Crimson Petal and the White by Michel Faber. That's another book that's just every sentence is just perfect and beautiful. So I really like books that are really well written.
Hmm.
Yeah, those are my two top ones for the style and the writing, the kind of talent that goes into it.
Yeah, I love the way you talk around it. It's about the art and the poetry behind the words, isn't it?
Definitely.
So when I asked the question earlier about the other authors in the genre and in the space, and you mentioned that you probably wouldn't want to read too much so that you weren't too influenced by it. But has there been any authors that you would say have inspired your writing or your world currently?
I think Robin Hobb,
Hmm.
obviously. I mean, she's so amazing, but I could gush about her all day. But I
Shout
really love
out.
the way. I love the way because she wrote a trilogy. I don't know if you've read the Realm of the Eldings. There's a trilogy about the main character's Fitz, and then it goes to another part of the world for another trilogy, and then it comes back. And then, so I really love that kind of structure, and I think that was a really good way of developing the world and just kind of making it really in depth. So I
Hmm.
kind of got the chance to do that with my Five Realms series because first of all they asked for a trilogy, and I wrote that, and then they asked for another trilogy, And I realised I'd called the series the Five Realms, but it'd all been set in one realm. So I thought, oh, I better go explore another part. And then that kind of inspired me to think, well, I could do that kind of thing where I could have a different set of characters, and it could feed into the main story. So I've had the chance to do that, and then now I'm doing another trilogy where I come back to my original characters. So yeah, I think that's a really, really inspiring way to do it, and a really nice way to build your world.
I think to say that you didn't want to go into writing and you wanted to be an illustrator, you're writing a lot of books. Got
I
a
am
lot
now.
planned.
Yeah. Well, make hay while the sun shines. So
Absolutely. And you lead really nicely onto another question that was submitted by Andrew, which is, what inspired you to make the Five Realms books? Appreciate we've probably touched on this one already.
yeah, just because I wanted to. I mean, the books I read when I was little, the fantasy books were just, they created that sense of magic which stays with you your entire life. I mean, you read books as an adult and you love them, but they don't. I mean, they don't have that same magic, that same importance and power that captures you. And I think back to the books. I've even gone back and reread them now, and they're still the same. There's something about reading a book and loving it as a child that that stays with you your whole life. So I just kind of wanted to do that, and create something like that, and hopefully, have that inspire children today that are reading it and make them want to go on and love fantasy books and love reading and ultimately become authors themselves maybe one day.
I love that idea. Absolutely. We've spoken a bit about the maps and the stories. Of course, you have. I will turn to the page without cracking the spine because we don't do that. We
God, no.
have obviously a map there. We have the gorgeous one on the tree keepers. So, which comes first, the map or the writing?
I think usually, well, I have an idea of I'm quite visual when I think things. I just things that work kind of visually, and I get like a scene or a setting in my head first of all. But then yeah, definitely. So I knew I wanted to write about rabbits, but then I went down and I sat down and drew the map because it's a really good way of just kind of. There's lots of ideas flying around your head and all sorts of things can happen. But when you sit down, once you've drawn that map and you've got this is the world and you've got it there in front of you, it becomes concrete then, and it's like a real place in your head anyway. But so yeah, and then the story kind of fits around it, and sometimes the map actually dictates the story. For example, on that map you just showed, when I was drawing that, I just thought, because it was based on like Bronze Age England, I thought, oh, there'd better be a massive forest there because we had lots of ancient forests before we chopped them all down. So I put this huge forest in the middle, just thinking, oh, I better go in there. And then it turned out to be really important to the story. And the third book's actually completely set inside this forest. So sometimes when you're doing the map, you don't know where it's going to take you, and it kind of give you new ideas and new structure for the story.
And it goes back to what you said when we asked about the setting and how you talked about the Isle of Wight and seeing those rabbit warrens and thinking, I wonder what parties are going on down there. And absolutely, from starting to read the Tree Keepers, you really do get that sense of you really don't know which tree you're going to turn around and what's going on around there. And Steph submitted a really great question, which is, what special power would you want to be bestowed upon you by the tree?
Ooh. Well, I think I really like the shape walkers. So there's a kind of group of characters. They can shift their shape, and they're like the protectors of the magic tree. But they change into, rather than kind of changing into animals, they change into like mythical beasts, like cockatrices and manticores and stuff like that. So that'd be quite cool. Be able to shapeshift into like a giant manticore and fly. I'd love to be able to fly. That'd be great.
I love some of the names that you've come up with. So I know they're quite familiar, but there's some names that have come through those books that I thought, how did Kieran come up with this? So quite a few people actually submitted this question. Ganesh, D, Louise. How do you select the names of your characters, but then also, I guess, the names for the species and the places?
Well, so characters, what I tend to do is I have an idea of what kind of character they're going to be, what kind of person they are, or maybe what kind of role they play in the story, like if they're a villain or something. And then I just play around and try and get a name that, it sounds a bit weird to explain, but but that fits that character, if you see what I mean. So, for example, like a villain's got to have a really sinister name. So, like my villain in the Five Realms is Scrammershank. That's a very harsh sounding name, and whereas with the cute characters like Pook and Podkin and Paz have like sweet sounding names. So I try and fit the names to the characters. Rabbits as well is quite useful because you can kind of use names of like plants and herbs and trees and things like, you know, rowan and rue and stuff like that. And places the same sort of thing. I kind of just try and get a name that fits, that has a sense of what it is I'm going to be writing about. And I do a big long list in my notebook, and you know, and pick ones, and sometimes I'll swap the old letters around and see what happens, and just play about a lot.
I love there's a lot to it, but then also it's quite simplistic, isn't it? And it really does carry into how you feel about the characters as well. Like thinking of Lug in the Tree Keepers, he's a bit of a lug, absolutely. Yeah, it really fits, and it's nice to know that, and absolutely we'll be thinking of that when continuing to read the series. So another question, back to the maps, of course. Quite a few questions submitted around. Do you have printouts of your maps around your house?
No, not on the walls or anything. I've got them all in a folder somewhere. No, I should do really. I've got like on the map in my room here, I've got a map of because my carnival books are all set in Victorian London, so I've got a really nice like antique map of Victorian London. I've got framed on the wall up there. Yeah, but none of mine at the moment as yet. I quite like, because they're all, each book I do in the Five Realms is like a different part, and I do a map. I'd quite like to kind of put them all together one day and have like a giant one, and maybe put that up somewhere. But yeah, not at the moment.
Need to change that.
Yeah, it's on my to-do list.
Go on. So back to the bunnies then. So Emma, I'm sure you knew this was going to come up. What did the
No,
bunnies ever do to you? But no, seriously, what differences do you find between writing animal characters and human? And is it the same writing process for both?
well, that's a tricky one. Well, I kind of guess I think of the rabbits as people really when I'm writing. I mean, I don't. I write.
That's
It's not like
scary.
Watership. Yeah, but I think Watership Down, for example, if you read that, then Richard Adams has clearly written them as rabbits. Um, but actually, technically, if you want to go into like the canon of it all, they're not actually completely rabbits because they are part rabbit, part human. They've been mixed with human DNA. So, so I kind of just write them as humans. But then it's quite useful when you're writing rabbits because obviously they have ears, but you can use those as a way to kind of show expression and feeling. So normally when you talk about someone frowning, you can talk about them twitching their ears, or pricking their ears up and listening and stuff like that. So it's like another layer to showing their emotions and stuff. But I don't really think of them, yeah, as animals. They're kind of like people, really.
I love the idea of being able to encapsulate a little bit more. You always see memes and jokes on the internet about why can't the author just say said? You know, it gives you a different layer to it. And again, it goes back to that visual, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So apart from the rabbits, do you have a favorite fiction, a character from your books?
Oh crikey. It's a bit like asking who's your favorite child, isn't it?
There was always one.
No, there isn't. Um, No, I love all of them really. I couldn't pick a favorite. Obviously, some of them are quite special to me. For example, Podkin, Pook and Paz. There are three siblings there, and a lot of that went. I was one of three, and I've got three children of my own, so lots of that went into them. The way they bicker and stuff, but they still love each other, and so they're quite special. And then there's some really cool characters that I like. Like a Crom in Podkin. He's super cool. I like writing him, and Jory, she's amazing. Yeah, and then the other books, I couldn't pick. I couldn't pick. They're all very special to
Sorry.
me. Yeah, it's too tricky. I always get when I go to schools. What's your favourite character? I just have to say, oh, I like them. I like them all the same. Apart from the
Oh
evil
yeah.
ones, you can make them really evil, and then you can enjoy destroying them.
I'm scared now, Kieran, honestly. You've talking about the threes. It's almost as if Zan knew that this would be a question she had to ask, which was, what three fictional characters would you have over for dinner?
Oh, crikey. So it had to be someone from Robin Hobb, I think. Probably not Fitz, because he'd probably be quite depressing, wouldn't he? He'd probably just sit and cry or brood all through the meal. But maybe the Fool would be good because he could do some like juggling and stuff. Um, who else? Bilbo Baggins. He would be good because he could talk about his adventures and things. Um, Oh, and I'm just reading Harrow the Night by Tamsin Muir. I
Mm.
don't know if you read that. She's a necromancer. She could like pull out one of her teeth and turn it into a skeleton. That would be quite entertaining as well.
Of course, what you want at dinner. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that'd be like afterwards before the coffee,
Why
watch some
not?
skeletons dance. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, we've, of course, children's author, you've done a lot of sessions with children, and they are weird and wonderful creatures, aren't they? So what would you say the weirdest thing is that you've been asked by a child?
Oh, I get random things all the time. Like what's your favorite? Oh, well, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite dance and stuff like that. Usually, some of them think that I actually sit and write every single word in each book myself
What, by
uh,
hand?
by hand. Yeah. They're like, how long does it take you to write every page? And then once someone asked me what was the worst injury I'd ever received when I was writing. I don't know what thing it goes on when you're writing, but I mean, basically just sitting in a chair doing that. It's not.
Hmm.
My wrist got a little bit sore once.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I will have to ask then. So what gel pen did you use for this one?
Yes.
Thinking of weird questions then, Erin submitted a great question. I can't wait to hear the answer for this one. What is the weirdest thing that you've Googled for research?
Oh God. You'd be surprised, especially when I'm doing like historical things.
Hmm.
Because you've got to try and be like a little bit factually accurate. But I remember one of them was there's a scene where they use some chloroform, so I had to Google stuff about how do you use chloroform? How long does chloroform last for? And then I was thinking, well, if ever anyone seizes my laptop, this is going to come up in court. Yeah, stuff like that. When was because you put things in a story and then you suddenly think, oh, it's set in 1850. They might not have had it then. So when was this invented? When was rubber invented? When was plastic?
Ah,
All sorts of things like that. Yeah. Thank goodness for
ma-
Google.
absolutely. So what would you say the best money you have ever spent is as a writer?
Oh God. I don't know. I don't really spend. I suppose you have to buy laptops and things, I guess. Notebooks. I think I've got lots and lots of notebooks. I've got this really nice set here. It's like a little leather bound thing, and you can fit extra. That's really been really good because you can swap the notebooks over when they're full.
Ah,
Pens. I don't know. Yeah, I can't think of
just-
anything. Yeah, just notebooks and pens. I love notebooks
mhm.
and pens. I've got far too many.
I feel like it's a really generic answer for a writer, but from what you've said anyway, around where your ideas initially for writing came from, going back through your notebooks and looking at your doodles, it's absolutely clear why you'd say pen and paper. You
Yeah.
must be a very easy person to buy for Christmas.
Yes, you would think so, but I still get things like socks and stuff like that. But yeah.
Oranges and coal.
Yeah.
So thinking then on to the future, Rob submitted a question around what does the future look like for you and your writing?
Oh, okay. So I've got quite a few books coming out next year. Problem is, because some things that haven't been announced. I'm not sure if what I'm allowed to say or not. I've got another Podkin one's coming out next year, book 7. Book 3 of Carnival of the Lost is out next July, I think. Um, and then I've got a new. I don't know if not. I'm not allowed to say or not. I've got a new series for younger readers coming out, hopefully next year. Um, and what else? I have written another new book, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure when that's coming out. And there's talk of. I just heard on Friday. You're the first people to hear this. Actually, there's talk of.
Exclusive.
Yeah, it might probably won't actually happen now. I've said it, but they're going to rebrand all of the Podkin books and kind of re-release them, but with like new covers and new titles and it's kind of like a big rebranding thing. Hopefully next year before book 7 comes out,
Oh, fantastic.
which is
That's
quite
great
exciting.
news.
Yes, yeah. So it's quite good. Lots of stuff to do.
Abs- Lots on, absolutely. And as we mentioned already, you've recently released a book. How would you, after having quite a few books out there already, Danny submitted a question of being a debut author herself. How has your latest release felt as an author?
It's quite exciting because it's like that's a whole new. The Tree Kids is like a whole new world, like a whole new story. So that's quite exciting. Also a little bit scary, like, oh, how is this going to do and stuff. Yeah, it's nice to have something new out, because when you're doing a series, like the first one, obviously is it's quite a big deal, quite a big release. But then after that, as they come out, it becomes sort of less and less exciting. But yes, it was really nice having a new story out there. Yeah, so hopefully it does well and stuff. But
Mm. So if your book series were your children, the Tree Keepers would be your favourite right now, yes?
possibly.
And I'm joking, you don't have to answer, don't worry.
It depends how it sells. If it sells really well, then it will be my favourite. Yeah.
Well, of course.
If it doesn't,
And
it's going
Danny,
in the bin.
very dramatic. Danny submitted another question about your journey and wanted to ask, what are your best memories of your journey to becoming a published author?
I think the kind of the big moments are, for example, like when you win a competition, or when your book comes out, actually. And obviously, oh yeah, go the first time you go into a bookshop and see it on the shelves, that's always magical and stuff. But I've been lucky to win a couple of competitions. So you get put on the long list first of all, and then you're like, oh crikey, what's going to happen? Then you get on the short list, and then the tension builds, and then kind of the day of the announcement, you're usually panicking, and then depending on how it's announced, you might get an email or a phone call and say, and a couple of times I've had the call saying that I've won. So that's been pretty amazing.
Wow, that's amazing. And well, hopefully more to come even further in the future.
Yeah, hope
Can't get my
so.
words out
Fingers
there.
crossed. Fingers crossed.
Two last questions then. So Erin asked, have you ever drafted any stories for adults?
Well, funny you should say that, because I've been really good on my deadlines, and I've managed to get everything done so far this year. So I've got between now and Christmas, which is kind of a bit empty. So I've just started thinking about an adult book, but
Ah.
it's not going very well. So I wouldn't I
Oh,
wouldn't hold your breath. I think it's very difficult because children's obviously, you've got to keep it quite light, haven't you? And you can put jokes in there, and you've got to have like positive messages and stuff. But if you take all that out, it just becomes really, really dark. So even just at the kind of the planning stage, I'm depressing myself, kind of like planning or going, oh God, this is going to be so miserable to write. So I don't know. I'll give it a go and see what happens.
I I get what you're saying, but I also do find that children's books are probably the ones that get me the most. They have the biggest messages, I find, and I have cried so much over children's books. And I
Yeah,
know certainly with Erin asking that question, I know she's got a Pixar ban as an example. You just can't do children's stuff, can you?
they tweak on the emotions, don't they? They get you there.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. And I really wanted to get this last one in, as I'm sure you know, Els and Roland are a huge fan of your work. So she wanted to say,
Good.
first off, wanted to let you know that you are our favourite kids author in the household. I've read and heard there are other authors who have been an inspiration to you. How would you react if one day someone would come up to you and say, as a kid or a teen or an adult, I loved your books and you've been an inspiration to me?
Oh, hello, Els and Roland. First of all, hope you're doing all right. Yeah, that would be. I mean, that's magical, isn't it? That's the reason you do it all. That's the kind of entire reason for writing for children, is to kind of inspire them in that way. So yeah, it would be my literal dream come true if someone came up to me and said that. That would be just beyond my wildest dreams. I'd be so happy.
And I'm sure you will get it. Absolutely. Well, that's time then wrapping up. One last question, though. I appreciate I've said that a couple of times. So, as most of you will know on here, next month is actually the start of our Fantasy Fellowship Readathon, the second one this year. And one of the bonus prompts that you will be able to use towards your points building is ones selected by the authors. So, Kieran, must ask, what prompt would you like to submit?
So obviously I'm a children's author, and we've been talking quite a lot about children's books and middle grade books. So my prompt is to read a middle grade book.
Brilliant, thank you. And I will say, if anyone wants to read, Podkin fits some of the prompts already, but absolutely pick this one up. Well, thank you so much, Kieran, for giving up your time again to answer some of our questions. And thank you everyone that has joined today for this session of the Fantasy Fellowship Con. We have other interviews and workshops on the schedule, which you can find over on our Instagram, our Twitter, and also on our website, www.fantasyfellowship.co.uk/com. If you have any questions, submit over on there. But thank you so much for joining. Have a great day and see you in some of the next sessions.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.